Chapter 1. The Whisper of the Auction. The grand hall of Sotheby's auction house in London buzzed with anticipation, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over the polished mahogany seats. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the rustle of silk dresses as the elite of society gathered for the evening's event. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit, his moustache waxed to perfection, sat in the third row, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He was not here to bid, but to observe, a task that suited his meticulous nature. The item of interest was Lot 47, an emerald pendant, its stone the size of a quail's egg, rumored to carry a curse that had claimed lives for over a century. Poirot's presence had been requested by his old friend Inspector Japp, who had a hunch that tonight's auction might attract more than just wealthy collectors. "Something's off, Poirot," Japp had muttered over tea that morning. "This pendant, it's got a history, and I don't trust the crowd it's drawing." The auctioneer, a wiry man with a nasal voice, stepped to the podium, tapping his gavel lightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we now present Lot 47, the Phantom Pendant, a masterpiece of 19th century craftsmanship, once owned by the ill-fated Comtesse de la Roche." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the pendant was unveiled on a velvet cushion. Its emerald gleamed with an almost unnatural fire, set in an intricate gold filigree that seemed to pulse under the lights. Poirot noted the reactions around him. A woman in a sapphire gown clutched her pearls, a man in a tweed jacket scribbled furiously in a notebook, and a figure in the back row shifted nervously, their face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. The bidding began at £50,000, climbing rapidly as hands shot up. Poirot's gaze settled on three figures in particular. The first was Lady Beatrice Harrow, a reclusive heiress whose pale face betrayed a mix of fascination and fear. She bid hesitantly, her gloved hand trembling. Next was Marcus Finch, an art dealer with a reputation for bending the law. His smirk suggested confidence, but his eyes darted to the exits. Finally, Dr. Elias Vaughan, a historian specializing in cursed artifacts, sat rigid, his notebook filled with cryptic symbols rather than numbers. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with possibilities. Each seemed drawn to the pendant for reasons beyond its value. As the bids reached £200,000, the lights flickered. A collective gasp filled the room as darkness swallowed the hall for a mere 10 seconds. When the chandeliers blazed back to life, the pendant was gone. The velvet cushion lay empty, and in its place was a folded note, written in elegant script. "The phantom claims what is hers." Chaos erupted, shouts of outrage, accusations, and the auctioneer's frantic calls for calm. Poirot remained seated, his fingers steepled, his mind already dissecting the scene. Inspector Japp appeared at his side, his face flushed. "Blast it, Poirot! I knew it. A theft, right under our noses." He gestured to the note, now in an evidence bag. "What do you make of this nonsense about a phantom?" Poirot's eyes twinkled.
"Nonsense, mon ami."
"Non. It is a clue. The thief wishes us to believe in this curse, to distract from their true motive. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily swayed by ghost stories." He rose, adjusting his cufflinks. "Come, we must examine the scene before it is trampled by these excited messieurs and mesdames." The stage was cordoned off, but Poirot's reputation granted him access. He knelt beside the pedestal, his magnifying glass catching the light. The velvet showed no signs of tampering, no cuts, no threads pulled. The thief had been swift, precise. He noticed a faint smudge of powder on the pedestal's edge, pale and chalky. "Interesting," he murmured, pocketing a sample with a handkerchief. "This is not dust, but perhaps makeup or something more deliberate." Japp scratched his head. "Makeup? You think the thief was primping mid-heist?" Poirot sits, moustache twitched with amusement. "Non, Inspector, but it is a trace of their presence. N'est-ce pas? We must also consider the note. The handwriting is too refined for a common criminal. This was planned, theatrical." He turned his attention to the crowd, now milling about under the watchful eyes of constables. Lady Beatrice stood apart, her face ashen, clutching a lace handkerchief. Marcus Finch was arguing with a security guard, his voice loud, but his eyes scanning the room. Dr. Vaughan had vanished, only to reappear moments later, claiming he'd stepped out for air. Poirot noted each detail, his mind cataloguing inconsistencies. "Jap, I require the guest list and the seating chart," Poirot said, "and the backgrounds of our three most interesting bidders, Lady Beatrice, Monsieur Finch, and Dr. Vaughan. They are not here by chance." Jap nodded, barking orders to a constable. "You think one of them pulled it off?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his tone measured. "Or perhaps they are pieces in a larger game. The Pendant Sept's curse is a distraction, but its history, that is where the truth lies. We must learn why this jewel inspires such desperation." As the crowd was ushered out, Poirot lingered, his eyes drawn to the empty pedestal. The note's words echoed in his mind. The phantom claims what is hers. Was it a taunt, a clue, or a declaration of ownership? He recalled the Comtesse de la Roche, whose tragic disappearance had birthed the pendant's legend. A lover's betrayal, a missing fortune, a vow of vengeance. Whispers of these tales had reached him even before tonight. The pendant was more than a jewel. It was a key to a forgotten story. Poirot stepped into the cool night air, the fog curling around the street lamps. A figure lingered across the street, their silhouette blurred by the mist. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane. "Hastings," he called to his friend, who had just joined him.
We are watched.
"This theft is but the first move in a chess game, and Hercule Poirot does not play to lose." Hastings, ever loyal but perpetually baffled, adjusted his hat. "You think the thief's still here, Poirot? Bold, if you ask me." "Bold, yes," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing, "but also desperate. The pendant is a magnet for secrets, and secrets, mon ami, are my specialty." As they walked toward their waiting car, Poirot's mind raced. The powder, the note, the suspect's reactions, each was a thread in a tapestry he would unravel. The phantom pendant was not just stolen. It was coveted, perhaps for reasons buried in the past. Tomorrow he would visit Lady Beatrice, whose fear suggested she knew more than she admitted. For now he would let the thief believe they had outwitted Hercule Poirot. But in his heart he knew the game had only begun. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Fog. The London night was thick with fog, a swirling shroud that muffled the clatter of horse-drawn cabs and the distant chime of Big Ben. Hercule Poirot stepped out of the auction house, his polished shoes clicking against the cobblestones, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. The theft of the phantom pendant had set his little grey cells ablaze, and he was determined to pursue the first thread of the mystery before the trail grew cold. Inspector Japp had returned to Scotland Yard to coordinate the investigation, leaving Poirot and Captain Hastings to explore the auction house after hours. The fog, Poirot mused, was both a hindrance and an ally, concealing clues but also the thief's movements. "Mon ami," Poirot said, adjusting his scarf against the damp chill, "we must return to the scene of the crime. The auction house holds secrets that the daylight did not reveal." Hastings, bundled in a tweed overcoat, frowned. "In this peace-oper, we still be lucky to find the door, let alone a clue. Shouldn't we wait for Japsit's men to finish their sweep?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Non, Hastings. The police, they look for the obvious fingerprints, footprints, but Hercule Poirot seeks the subtle, the hidden, the fog. It is our friend tonight. It keeps the curious away." They hailed a cab, the driver grumbling about the weather, and arrived at Sotheby's, now dark save for a single lantern glowing at the entrance. The guard, a burly man with a walrus mustache, recognized Poirot and let them in with a reluctant nod. "Don't touch anything, sir," he warned. "Inspector's orders." "Bien sûr," Poirot replied, his tone smooth as silk. "I touch only with my eyes." Inside, the grand hall felt cavernous without the crowd, its shadows stretching long under the dim electric lights. The pedestal where the pendant had rested stood like a silent sentinel. Poirot approached it, his magnifying glass catching the faint glow. The chalky smudge he'd noticed earlier was still there, undisturbed. He leaned closer, sniffing delicately. Talcum, perhaps, he murmured. Or something more specific. A cosmetic, used to conceal. Hastings peered over his shoulder. Conceal what? A face? You think the thief was in disguise? Perhaps, Poirot said, pocketing another sample, or perhaps to mask a tool set's residue. The theft was too swift for clumsiness. We must consider all possibilities. He moved to the auctioneer's desk, a heavy oak piece tucked behind the stage. Its surface was cluttered with papers, bidding records, catalogues, but Poirot's eyes were drawn to a drawer slightly ajar. With a gloved hand, he eased it open, revealing a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon. The topmost bore a wax seal, cracked but intact, depicting a rose entwined with a serpent. Curious, Poirot said, scanning the first letter. It was dated 1892, addressed to the Comtesse de la Roche, the pendant's original owner. The script was elegant, but the tone urgent. The pendant must not leave Paris. Its guardian watches. Beware the oath. The signature was a single initial V. Hastings read over his shoulder, his brow furrowing. Guardian? Oath? Sounds like a load of rot. Poirot. Probably some lovesick poet. Non-Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. This is no poetry. It is a warning, and it connects the pendant to something far older than tonight. Sif's theft. The Comtesse vanished. Did she not? And now her jewel vanishes too. Coincidence? Hercule Poirot thinks not. He tucked the letters into his coat, intending to study them later. As they moved toward the back exit, a faint creak echoed from the upper gallery. Poirot froze, his hand tightening on his cane. "We are not alone," he whispered. Hastings reached for his revolver, but Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, mon ami. Let us observe." They crept toward the staircase, the fog outside pressing against the windows, casting eerie patterns. At the top a shadow moved, a figure cloaked in a dark coat, their face obscured. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but before he could call out, the figure darted toward a side door. "After them!" Hastings shouted, bounding up the stairs. Poirot followed at a more measured pace, his mind racing. The door led to a narrow alley, where the fog was so dense they could barely see 10 feet ahead. Hastings charged forward, but Poirot paused, noticing a glint on the ground, a single pearl, likely from a glove or a dress. He pocketed it, his lips pursing. The alley opened onto a busy street, where a black car roared to life, its tires screeching as it sped into the fog. Hastings cursed, but Poirot remained calm. "They escape for now," he said. "But they have left us a gift. This pearl, it is not common. It will lead us to its owner." As they returned to the auction house, Poirot's thoughts turned to the suspects. Lady Beatrice Harrow's trembling hands suggested fear, but also knowledge. Marcus Finch's shady connections made him a likely candidate for orchestrating a theft, yet his bravado seemed too obvious. Dr. Elias Vaughan's nervous demeanor and cryptic notes hinted at a deeper involvement. And now this shadowy figure, were they a fourth player, or one of the three in disguise? Back inside, Poirot examined the back door. Its lock was intact, suggesting the thief had a key or had picked it with skill. This was no amateur, he said. The blackout, the note, the escape, all planned with precision. But why the note? Why taunt us with this, sir? Phantom Seb. Hastings rubbed his chin. To throw us off, maybe. Make us chase ghosts instead of thieves? Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. But the phantom is no ghost. It is a person with a motive rooted in the pendant sip's past. We must learn more of this. Comtesse and her said guardian. As they stepped back into the fog, Poirot's mind churned. The letters, the pearl, the talcum smudge, each was a piece of the puzzle. The car's sudden appearance suggested a lookout. Someone watching the auction house. Was it the same figure from the gallery, or another accomplice? Poirot's thoughts drifted to the note's elegant script, so similar to the letters in the drawer. A woman's hand, perhaps, or a man trained in calligraphy. They reached their lodgings, the fog now a heavy blanket over Baker Street. Poirot lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like the mist outside. "Tomorrow, Hastings, we visit Lady Beatrice. Her fear at the auction was not merely for the pendant's curse. She knows something, perhaps of this guardian or the oath." Hastings yawned, loosening his tie. "You think she sets mixed up in it?" She seemed more scared than guilty. "Fear and guilt, mon ami, are often twins," Poirot said. "The pendant is a key, but to what lock? A fortune, a secret, or a vengeance long delayed? We shall see." As Hastings retired, Poirot sat by the window, staring into the fog. The phantom pendant was more than a jewel. It was a beacon, drawing greed, fear, and secrets into its orbit. Somewhere in the mist, the thief moved, believing themselves clever. But Hercule Poirot was already steps ahead, his mind weaving the threads of the mystery into a tapestry only he could read. Chapter 3. The Heiress's Secret. The morning sun struggled through the heavy drapes of Lady Beatrice Harrow's Belgravia Manor, casting long shadows across the parquet floor. Hercule Poirot, seated in a plush armchair, sipped tea from a delicate porcelain cup, his eyes never straying from his hostess. Lady Beatrice, a woman in her late 40s with silver-streaked hair and a face etched with worry, sat opposite him, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief. Captain Hastings stood by the fireplace, pretending to admire a marble bust while listening intently. The theft of the phantom pendant had brought Poirot here, drawn by the heiress's trembling bid at the auction and the fear that had flickered in her eyes. "Madame Harrow," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet, "you were most interested in the phantom pendant last night, n'est-ce pas? Yet your bids, they were hesitant. Poirot quo? Was it the jewel sept's beauty, its value, or perhaps its curse?" Lady Beatrice Sist's lips parted, but no sound came. She glanced at the tall windows, as if expecting an eavesdropper. "Monsieur Poirot," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper, "I wanted the pendant, yes, but not for its beauty. It belongs to my family, or it did, long ago." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign his little grey cells were engaged. "Your family, madame?" "The pendant belonged to the Comtesse de la Roche, non? A Frenchwoman vanished in 1892. How does this connect to the Harrows of England?" She rose, moving to a mahogany desk, her movements jerky. From a drawer she produced a small leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. "This was my great-aunt's," she said, handing it to Poirot. "Eleanor Harrow. She was entangled with the Comtesse. They were friends, or so the family story goes. But there was a scandal, a betrayal. The pendant was stolen from Eleanor, and the Comtesse disappeared soon after." Poirot opened the journal, scanning the elegant script. The entries spoke of clandestine meetings in Paris, a forbidden love, and a vow tied to the pendant. One passage caught his eye. "The rose and serpent seal our oath. The pendant is hers, but it will be mine again, no matter the cost. The rose and serpent, identical to the seal on the letters he'd found at the auction house." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured, closing the journal. "This oath, Madame Harrow, it suggests a claim. Did you bid to reclaim this family heirloom, or to protect it from others who know its secret?" Lady Beatrice's eyes widened, and her handkerchief tore slightly under her grip. I don't know what you mean. I only wanted to keep it safe. The curse people have died for that pendant. My great-aunt? She went mad after it was stolen. They said it was grief, but I've always wondered. But—" Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And this curse, madame, do you believe it? Or is it a convenient tale to hide a truth less supernatural?" Before she could answer, a maid entered, announcing a telephone call. Lady Beatrice excused herself, her face paling further. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, who whispered, "She sips hiding something, Poirot. That journal. It sips practically a confession." "Non-Hastings," Poirot said softly. "It is a clue, but not to guilt. Fear, perhaps, or obligation. We must learn who called her, and why now." While Lady Beatrice was occupied, Poirot's eyes roamed the room. A silver-framed photograph on the mantel caught his attention, a young woman in 1890s attire, strikingly similar to Lady Beatrice, wearing a pendant that matched the stolen jewel's description. Beside it was a small box, its lid engraved with the rose and serpent symbol. Poirot opened it, finding a single pearl, identical to the one from the auction house alley. "Voila!" he said, holding it up. "The plot thickens, mon ami. This pearl links the manor to the thief Sepp's escape. But is Lady Beatrice the thief or a target?" Hastings frowned. "She doesn't strike me as the thieving type. Too nervous. But that phone call, could it be a conspirator?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, pocketing the pearl with a handkerchief, or someone warning her. The pendant Sepp's theft was theatrical, designed to draw attention. We must consider who benefits from such a spectacle. Lady Beatrice returned, her composure fraying. "I'm sorry, Monsieur Poirot, but I must ask you to leave. I'm unwell." Her eyes darted to the mantel, and Poirot noted her glance at the now empty box. "Of course, madame," he said, rising with a bow. "But permit me one question. The rose and serpent, what does it mean to you?" Her breath caught, and for a moment she seemed on the verge of collapse. "Its steps, a family crest. Nothing more. Please go." Outside, the air was crisp, the fog of the previous night replaced by a pale autumn sun. Hastings lit a cigarette, exhaling with frustration. "She sips lying through her teeth, Poirot. That crest, the pearl, the journal, it sips all connected. Why one sips she talk?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes gleaming. "Because, Hastings, she is afraid not only of the curse but of the truth it conceals. The pendant is a key to a scandal, one that her family has buried for decades, but someone else knows, and they have acted." As they walked to their car, Poirot's mind churned. The journal's mention of an oath suggested a pact, perhaps a secret society or a personal vendetta. The pearl linked Lady Beatrice to the auction house, but was it hers or planted to incriminate her? The phone call was another puzzle piece. Had it been a threat, a warning, or a summons? And the rose and serpent symbol tied the past to the present, hinting at a guardian who still watched. "Hastings," Poirot said, pausing at the car door, "we must investigate the Comtesse de la Roche further. Her disappearance is the heart of this mystery, and we must watch Lady Beatrice. She is not the thief, I think, but she is a pawn in a game she does not understand." Hastings nodded, climbing into the car. "Where to next?" "Scotland Yard." "Non," Poirot said, his voice firm. "To the British Library. There we shall find records of the Comtesse and this scandal. The pendant Sepp's curse is a fiction, but its history is real, and it will lead us to the thief." As the car rolled through London's bustling streets, Poirot's thoughts returned to the auction. Lady Beatrice's fear, Marcus Finch's bravado, Dr. Vaughan's cryptic notes, all were threads in a tapestry of deception. The Phantom Pendant was more than a jewel. It was a catalyst, drawing out secrets long buried, and Hercule Poirot, with his unmatched intellect, was determined to unravel them, one clue at a time. Chapter 4. The historian Sepp's burden. The rain pattered against the windows of Dr. Elias Vaughan's cramped office in Bloomsbury, a cluttered space filled with dusty tomes, yellowed maps and artifacts that seemed to whisper of forgotten eras. Hercule Poirot sat across from the historian, his gloved hands folded neatly over his cane, his sharp eyes studying the man's nervous tics. Vaughan, a wiry figure with thinning hair and spectacles perched precariously on his nose, fidgeted with a pencil, his gaze darting to the door as if expecting an intruder. Captain Hastings stood by a bookshelf, feigning interest in a volume on medieval relics, but his ears were attuned to the conversation. Poirot had come to probe the historian's knowledge of the Phantom Pendant, suspecting his cryptic notes at the auction held more than academic curiosity. "Monsieur le Docteur," Poirot began, his voice calm but probing, "you are an expert in cursed artifacts, oui? The Phantom Pendant, it fascinates you. Yet at the auction, you did not bid. Instead, you scribbled in your notebook, symbols, not numbers. Why?" Dr. Vaughan's pencil snapped in his hand, and he flushed, brushing the pieces into a drawer. I was documenting its history, Monsieur Poirot. The pendant is a remarkable piece, tied to the Comtesse de la Roche. Its curse is well documented. Misfortune follows its owners. I wanted to ensure its provenance before it changed hands. Poirot sits, mustache twitched, a sign of skepticism. Provenance, you say. Yet your notes, they were not of dates or owners, but of symbols, a rose and serpent, perhaps, the same as on certain letters I have seen. Tell me, what is this The Guardian set you wrote of? Vaughan's eyes widened, and he pushed his spectacles up, his hands trembling. How did you— it's just a legend. The Comtesse, she was part of a society, they say, the Order of the Rose and Serpent. They believed the pendant held power, not just value. The Guardian was their protector, sworn to keep it from unworthy hands. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. And you, Monsieur Vaughan, do you believe in this power, or do you know who this Guardian is today? The historian's face paled, and he rose, pacing to a cluttered table covered with papers. It's all myth, surely. I study these things, not believe them. The pendant's history is my interest. Its thefts, its tragedies. The Comtesse vanished in 1892, after a scandal involving a lover and a stolen fortune. The pendant was blamed, said to bring ruin. Poirot's swift eyes followed von Sipp's movements, noting a locked cabinet behind the desk, its keyhole scratched as if recently forced. A scandal, you say? Like the one involving Eleanor Harrow, perhaps? The pendant was stolen from her family. None? You know more than you admit, monsieur. Before Vaughan could respond, a crash echoed from the hall, a window shattering followed by the thud of footsteps. Hastings sprang to the door, revolver in hand, but Poirot raised a finger, urging caution. Stay, Hastings. Let us see what comes to us. They waited, the rain sept's drum beat. The only sound. Moments later, a constable appeared, soaked and breathless, sent by Inspector Jepp. Sir, the office was broken into an hour ago. Papers scattered, but nothing reported stolen. Dr. Vaughan, you didn't sept mention this when we called earlier. Vaughan sank into his chair, his hands covering his face. I didn't think it mattered. Just vandals, surely. My work on the pendant, it attracts odd sorts. Poirot Sip's eyes narrowed. Odd sorts, or those seeking what you know. Show me these papers, monsieur, before more said vandal Sip's return. Reluctantly, Vaughan unlocked the cabinet, revealing a folder labeled Phantom Pendant. Inside were sketches of the jewel, maps of 19th century Paris, and a photograph of the Comtesse wearing the pendant, her expression haunted. One page, torn at the edges, detailed the Order of the Rose and Serpent, describing a vow to reclaim the pendant at all costs. A name was circled in red ink. Vesper. Poirot's fingers lingered on the word, recalling the V on the auction house letters. This Vesper, Poirot said. Is it the Guardian, or another ghost from the past? Vaughan Supt's voice was barely audible. I don't Supt know. I found the name in an archive linked to the Order. They were fanatics, Monsieur Poirot. They believed the pendant was a key to something greater. Power, wealth, I don't Supt know. I only wanted to understand. Hastings, unable to stay silent, interjected. Understand. You stir shaking like a leaf, man, if you stir not in on the theft. Someone thinks you are. That break-in wasn't set random. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The break-in suggested someone feared Vaughan's knowledge, or sought it. The torn page, the circled name, clues left behind, or taken. He examined the cabinet's lock, noting fresh scratches. This was no vandal, he said. A professional, perhaps, but hurried. They took something, Monsieur Vaughan. What was it? Vaughan hesitated, then pulled a small key from his pocket. A letter was missing. It mentioned a meeting place, a crypt in Paris where the Order once gathered. I didn't think it important, until the pendant was stolen. Poirot Sip's eyes gleamed. A crypt, you say? Most intriguing. And this letter, did it mention the Rose and Serpent? Vaughan nodded, his face ashen. Yes, it bore their seal. I thought it was just historical trivia, but now it is a map to the thief, Poirot finished. Or to those who seek the pendant sept's secret, you will give me the details of this crypt, monsieur, and any other notes you have withheld. As Vaughan scribbled the information, Poirot's thoughts turned to the auction. The blackout, the note, the shadowy figure in the fog, all pointed to a plan rooted in the pendant's past. Vaughan's research placed him dangerously close to the truth, making him a target or a suspect. The rose and serpent symbol linked him to Lady Beatrice's journal and the auction house letters, weaving a web of connections Poirot was determined to untangle. They left the office, the rain now a drizzle, the streets slick and gleaming. Hastings tucked the folder under his coat, grumbling. "He sips hiding something, Poirot. All that talk of myths, but he sips scared stiff, think he sips part of this order." "None," Hastings, Poirot said, adjusting his hat. "He is a scholar, not a conspirator, but he knows too much for his own safety. The break-in was a warning, or a search for this missing letter. We must find this crypt, and we must watch Dr. Vaughan. He is a key, whether he knows it or not." As they climbed into a cab, Poirot's mind churned. The name Vesper, the Order of the Rose and Serpent, the missing letter, all pointed to a secret older than the theft, one tied to the Comtesse's disappearance. The Phantom Pendant was a beacon drawing greed and vengeance from the shadows, and Hercule Poirot, with his unmatched intellect, was ready to follow its light to the truth. Chapter 5. The Dealer Sept's Gambit. The Thames glistened under a weak afternoon sun, its waters lapping against the weathered planks of Wapping's docks. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the sharp breeze, stood at the edge of a narrow street, his keen eyes fixed on a warehouse bearing the faded sign, Finch and Company Imports. Marcus Finch, the art dealer whose smirking confidence at the auction had piqued Poirot's suspicions, operated from this unassuming hub, rumoured to be a front for less than legal dealings. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his hat and muttered, "Shady place for a shady character, eh, Poirot? You sure this Finch is worth our time?" "Mais oui, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low but firm. Monsieur Finch's bravado at the auction was a mask, but his eyes, they betrayed calculation. He knows more of the Phantom Pendant seft's value than he admits, and Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences. They approached the warehouse, its iron door slightly ajar, emitting the faint clink of crates being moved. Poirot's cane tapped a deliberate rhythm as he entered, his polished shoes out of place amidst the grime. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and tobacco. Finch stood at the far end, barking orders at two burly men unloading a shipment. His tailored suit contrasted with the rough surroundings, but his quick glance at Poirot suggested he'd been expecting visitors. "Monsieur Finch," Poirot called, his tone polite yet commanding. "A moment of your time, s'il vous plaît. We must discuss the matter of the Phantom Pendant." Finch's smirk returned, though his eyes flickered with unease. He waved his workers away, gesturing to a cluttered office partitioned by frosted glass. "Poirot isn't at it. The detective with the funny mustache. Come to accuse me of stealing that bauble." I sipped, flattered. Poirot settled into a creaky chair, his gaze never leaving Finch. "Accuse? Non, monsieur. I seek only the truth. Your bids at the auction were bold, yet you withdrew when the price soared. Why? And your reputation. It suggests a man who knows the black market sips appetite for such a jewel." Finch leaned back, lighting a cigarette with a practiced flick. "I stem a businessman, Poirot. That pendant sip's worth a fortune, cursed or not. I bid to gauge the competition, nothing more. When it vanished, I was as surprised as anyone. My alibi sipped solid. I was in my seat the whole time." Hastings snorted, leaning against the doorframe. "Solid? Half the room was in the dark during that blackout. You could slipped out and back in seconds." Finch's smirk faltered, and he exhaled a plume of smoke. "Careful, mate. I don't take kindly to accusations. I deal in art, not theft. Besides, why risk my neck for a cursed rock? I know its history. Death follows that thing. Poirot Sips' mustache twitched, a sign his mind was dissecting Finch Sips' words. You know its history, you say? The Comtesse de la Roche, the scandal, the Order of the Rose and Serpent, Tres Interessen. Tell me, what is its value on the black market? And to whom would you sell such a piece? Finch's eyes narrowed, and he stubbed out his cigarette. You stir fishing, Poirot. I don't deal in stolen goods, but if I did a piece like that, collectors in Istanbul, Shanghai, maybe Moscow, they pay millions, curse or no curse. Doesn't mean I took it. Poirot nodded, his fingers drumming lightly on his cane. Yet you know the markets, the buyers, and you were seen speaking with a man in a wide-brimmed hat before the auction, a man who vanished after the theft. Who was he? Finch's face tightened, and for a moment silence hung heavy. Then he laughed, a forced sound. You sat good, I sat'll give you that. That was just a client. Some rich toff wanting a painting, nothing to do with the pendant. You sat got no proof, Poirot. Before Poirot could press further, a commotion erupted outside, a crate crashing followed by a shout. Hastings rushed to the window, peering through the grimy panes. Someone's bolting out the back, he cried, already moving for the door. Poirot followed at a measured pace, his mind racing. They burst into the alley, where a figure in a dark coat sprinted toward a waiting car. The same black car from the auction house, Poirot noted, its engine roaring as it sped off. Hastings cursed, but Poirot's eyes caught a glint on the ground, a cigarette butt, still smouldering, its brand matching Finch's. Mon ami, Poirot said, retrieving it with his handkerchief. This is no coincidence. Monsieur Finch is not alone in this game. Back inside, Finch was gone, his office empty save for a spilled ashtray. Poirot's gaze fell on a ledger left open on the desk. He scanned it, noting entries for Emerald Artifact and a coded name. The same initial from the auction house letters and Dr. Vaughan's notes. A shipment to Istanbul was scheduled for tomorrow, marked urgent.
Hastings,
Poirot said, his voice sharp. Monsieur Finch is not the mastermind, but he is a player. It is the key. Vesper, perhaps, from the historian Sepp's notes. And this shipment, it suggests the pendant is already on the move. Hastings frowned, clutching the ledger. You think he sets smuggling it out? But why run if he sets innocent? Innocent? None, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming, but he is not the thief. He is a broker caught between greed and fear. Someone betrayed him today, perhaps this said forcing him to flee. We must find him before he leaves London. As they left the warehouse, the docks were alive with activity, stevedores shouting, cranes groaning. Poirot's mind churned. Finch's knowledge of the black market pointed to a network, one tied to the pendant's theft. The cigarette butt, the ledger, the fleeing figure, all were threads in a tapestry of deceit. The rose and serpent symbol linked Finch to Lady Beatrice and Dr. Vaughan, but the Vaughan suggested a fourth figure, perhaps the true guardian of the pendant. They hailed a cab, the city Sepp's clamour fading as Poirot Sipp's thoughts sharpened. To Scotland Yard, Hastings, he said. We must alert Jap to watch the ports. Finch will try to leave, but he cannot outrun Hercule Poirot. Hastings nodded, his jaw set. This is getting deeper, Poirot. The pendant sets not just a jewel, is it? It sets a magnet for trouble. Oui, mon ami, Poirot replied, staring out at the passing streets. It is a key to a secret, one that men and women will kill to protect or to claim. But the truth, it hides in the shadows, and Poirot will bring it to the light. Chapter 6. The Cipher in the Locket. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains of Hercule Poirot's Baker Street flat, casting a warm glow over the polished furniture and the clutter of papers on his desk. Poirot sat in his favourite armchair, a magnifying glass in one hand and a small silver locket in the other, a discovery from the auction house, found tucked beneath the pedestal where the Phantom Pendant had vanished. Captain Hastings paced by the fireplace, his restless energy a contrast to Poirot's calm precision. The locket, engraved with the now familiar rose and serpent symbol, had revealed a hidden compartment containing a slip of paper with a cryptic message, a string of numbers and letters, seemingly nonsensical. Poirot's little grey cells were alight with the challenge of decoding it, sensing it held a key to the pendant's theft. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice measured. "Cease your pacing. It disturbs the order of my thoughts. This cipher, it is no mere riddle. It is a deliberate clue left by the thief, or their master." Hastings stopped, peering over Poirot's sit's shoulder at the paper, which read 3R7S12 V9L4T. "Looks like gibberish to me, Poirot. Could be a code for a safe, maybe, or a map reference." Poirot's sit's moustache twitched with amusement. "A safe, perhaps, but too simplistic. This is a cipher of sophistication, tied to the order of the rose and serpent. The numbers and letters, they suggest a sequence, a location, or perhaps a name. We must test its meaning." He spread out a map of London, alongside Dr. Vaughan's notes and Lady Beatrice's journal, both bearing the rose and serpent seal. The letters from the auction house, signed with a single V, lay nearby, their cryptic warnings echoing in his mind. Poirot began cross-referencing the cipher's elements, his pencil moving with precision. The letters ORS, V, L, T may correspond to initials or to a pattern. The numbers, they could indicate steps, pages, or even streets.
Hastings, eager to contribute, suggested. "What if it Sepp's a book cipher?"
Vaughan Sepp's office was full of old tomes. Maybe the numbers point to pages or lines. "Bien pensé, Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But we have no book yet. Let us try another approach." He turned to Dr. Vaughan's folder, focusing on the historian's notes about the order of the rose and serpent. One passage described a meeting place in London, a forgotten chapel in Whitechapel, used by the order in the 1890s. The chapel's address was listed as 12 Vesper Lane, a detail that caught Poirot's attention. "Vesper," he murmured, tapping the cipher. "The Fell de Faustie in 12 ver, and the Comtesse's lover, named in Vaughan Sid's notes, was Vesper. This is no coincidence. The cipher points to a place, Hastings. Vesper Lane, perhaps, where the order once gathered." Hastings grabbed his coat. "Then let Sitz go. If the thief sits hiding there, we might catch them with the pendant." Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, mon ami. The cipher is incomplete. The other letters, Ras, E, Cell, T, they must mean something. Let us hypothesize. Ras for rose, Cell for serpent, lead for locket, T for theft. None too vague. We need context." He opened Lady Beatrice's journal, flipping to a page about the Comtesse's scandal. A line stood out. The oath was sealed at the chapel, under the rose window by the serpent's altar. "Voila!" Poirot exclaimed. The rose window, the serpent Sit's altar, Ration Cess, they are landmarks within the chapel. The numbers, they may indicate steps or positions. We must visit this Vesper Lane, but first we decode fully. Using a pencil, Poirot sketched a grid, assigning each letter a potential meaning based on the chapel's layout as described in Vaughan's notes. The numbers, he theorized, could represent steps from the entrance or pews from the altar. After an hour of meticulous calculation, he deciphered a possible solution. 3 steps from the rose window, 7 from the serpent's altar, 12 from Vesper's plaque, 9 from the locket's shrine, 4 from the thief's mark. The chapel, it seemed, hid a specific spot, a cache, perhaps, or a meeting point.
"Hastings,"
Poirot said, rising. "We go to Whitechapel, but we must be cautious. The thief or this Serge expects us to follow. The locket was left deliberately, a breadcrumb for Hercule Poirot." The cab ride to Whitechapel was tense, the city's bustle giving way to narrow, gaslit streets. The chapel on Vesper Lane was a crumbling relic, its Gothic arches overgrown with ivy, its rose window cracked but still vibrant. The door creaked as they entered, the air heavy with dust and mildew. Poirot's cane tapped softly as he counted steps from the rose window, then pivoted toward the altar, where a serpent carving coiled around a stone pillar. 3 steps from the window, he muttered, pacing. 7 from the altar. He moved methodically, his eyes scanning for a plaque or shrine. Near the back, a brass plate read Vesper, 1892, marking a memorial. 12 steps from it led to a cracked pew, where a faint carving, a locket's outline, was etched. 9 steps from there brought them to a loose floorboard, marked with a tiny scratch. Hastings knelt, prying the board up with his pocket-knife. Beneath was a small tin box, locked but rusted. Poirot's sipsard quickened. "Careful, Hastings. This may be a trap or a prize." The box contained a single sheet, folded and sealed with the rose and serpent symbol. It read, "The phantom waits where the oath was sworn. Find the crypt or lose all." No pendant, but another clue, pointing to a crypt, the same one mentioned in Vaughan's stolen letter. "Blast it, Poirot," Hastings said, frustrated. "Another riddle?" "They set leading us on a merry chase." "On, Hastings," Poirot said, pocketing the note. "They test us, but they underestimate Hercule Poirot. This crypt, it is in Paris, as Vaughan's letter suggested. The Order Sip's secrets are there, and perhaps the pendant." As they left the chapel, a shadow moved in the alley across the street, a figure in a dark coat, too swift to identify. Poirot Sip's hand tightened on his cane. "We are watched, mon ami? The thief, or their master, knows we are close. We must move quickly." Back in the cab, Poirot's mind raced. The locket cipher had led them to Vesper Lane, confirming the Order's role. The note's mention of a crypt tied it to Vaughan's research and the Comtesse's past. Marcus Finch's ledger, with its Vir and Istanbul shipment, suggested the pendant might already be abroad. But the shadow in the alley, Lady Beatrice, Vaughan, Finch, or the elusive V. The web was tightening, and Poirot was determined to find its center. "Hastings," he said, his voice firm. "We prepare for Paris, but first we visit Inspector Japp. The ports must be watched, and Monsieur Finch must be found. The Phantom Pendant is a key, but to what lock? Hercule Poirot will discover it." Chapter 7. The Masquerade Ball. The grand ballroom of Claridge's Hotel shimmered under crystal chandeliers, their light refracting through a kaleidoscope of masks and silken gowns. The air hummed with laughter, the clink of champagne flutes, and the strains of a string quartet. Hercule Poirot, disguised in a black domino mask and a velvet cape, blended seamlessly among the guests, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. The masquerade ball, hosted by Lady Beatrice Harrow, was an irresistible opportunity to observe the suspects in the theft of the Phantom Pendant, Lady Beatrice herself, Marcus Finch, and Dr. Elias Vaughan, all under one roof, their identities cloaked by costumes. Captain Hastings, dressed as a harlequin, hovered near the buffet, his enthusiasm for the mission tempered by his unease with the disguise. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, sidling up with a glass of punch, "this mask itches like the devil. Are you sure the thief will show their hand here? Seems a bit public for skullduggery." Poirot Sip's moustache twitched beneath his mask, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Mon ami, a masquerade is the perfect stage for secrets. The thief, or their accomplice, believes the crowd hides them, but Hercule Poirot sees through masks, literal and otherwise. Observe and listen." The ballroom was a swirl of color, peacock feathers, gilded masks, and swirling capes. Lady Beatrice, recognizable by her silver-streaked hair and a sapphire gown, glided among the guests, her mask adorned with roses. Marcus Finch, in a crimson doublet, laughed too loudly at a corner bar, his eyes darting to the exits. Dr. Vaughan, in a plain black cloak, lingered near a marble pillar, clutching a notebook as if it were a lifeline. Poirot noted their positions, his mind mapping their interactions like a chessboard. The cipher from the locket, decoded in the Whitechapel Chapel, still lingered in Poirot's thoughts. Its reference to a Paris crypt suggested the pendant's trail led abroad, but tonight's ball was a chance to uncover motives closer to home. The rose and serpent symbol, linking Lady Beatrice's journal, Vaughan's notes, and Finch's ledger, pointed to a conspiracy rooted in the Order of the Rose and Serpent. Poirot suspected one of the suspects, or the elusive V, might reveal themselves under the guise of anonymity. As the quartet struck up a waltz, Poirot maneuvered through the dancers, his cane tapping lightly. He approached Lady Beatrice, bowing with a flourish. "Madame, a dance, perhaps? Or do you prefer to guard your secrets from the shadows?" Her eyes, visible through her mask, widened briefly. "Monsieur Poirot, you are persistent," she said, her voice strained. "I host this ball for charity, not to be interrogated." "Charity, oui, but also opportunity," Poirot replied, guiding her into the waltz. "The pendant theft has unsettled you. Non, you fear its curse, or perhaps its truth." Lady Beatrice Sistin's step faltered, and she gripped his arm. "You don't understand, monsieur. The pendant, it sets a burden. My family sets history is tied to it, and I thought to buy it back, to end the pain. But now it sets gone, and I sets am afraid." Her words were cut off by a scream from across the ballroom. The music stopped, and guests turned toward a side corridor, where a woman in a silver mask stood, pointing at a crumpled figure on the floor. Poirot released Lady Beatrice and hurried over, Hastings at his heels. The figure was a young man, a waiter, unconscious but breathing, a spilled tray of glasses beside him. A small card lay near his hand, bearing the rose and serpent symbol and the word Vesper. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, pocketing the card with a handkerchief. He examined the waiter, noting a faint bruise on his temple. "Not a fall, Hastings. He was struck lightly to warn, not to kill." Hastings scanned the crowd. "The thief, or this Vesper character? They s'appelle Poirot." "Why, in bold," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. He glanced at the corridor, which led to private rooms. "Quickly, Hastings. We must search before the trail vanishes." They slipped down the corridor, the noise of the ball fading behind them. A locked door marked "Private" caught Poirot's attention. He produced a small lockpick kept for such occasions and opened it, revealing a small study. Inside, papers were strewn across a desk, and a window stood ajar, letting in the cool night air. Poirot's magnifying glass swept over the desk, pausing on a torn photograph of the Phantom Pendant, its emerald gleaming. A note beneath it read, "The crypt holds the truth. Vesper waits." "The crypt again," Poirot said, his voice low. "This is no coincidence. The thief is taunting us, or someone wishes us to follow." Hastings checked the window, finding a smudge of talcum powder on the sill, matching the residue from the auction house. "They climbed out here, Poirot. Same powder as before. We searched close." "Close, yes, but not yet victorious," Poirot said, pocketing the note and photograph. He returned to the ballroom, where Lady Beatrice was now surrounded by concerned guests. Finch had vanished, and Vaughan was scribbling furiously in his notebook, his face pale. Poirot approached Vaughan, his tone sharp. "Monsieur, you write as if your life depends on it. What did you see when the waiter fell?" Vaughan flinched, closing his notebook. "Nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I was distracted. The pendant cest history. It consumes me." "Consumes, or controls?" Poirot asked, his gaze piercing. "You know of Vesper, non? And the crypt? Speak, or I shall assume you hide more than knowledge." Vaughan stammered, but before he could answer, Lady Beatrice approached, her mask removed, her face ashen. "Monsieur Poirot, I must speak with you, alone. It seeps about the order." Poirot nodded, gesturing to a quiet alcove. "Madame, you have my attention. But know this, the truth cannot hide forever, not from Hercule Poirot." As Hastings kept watch, Poirot listened to Lady Beatrice's halting confession. She spoke of her great-aunt Eleanor's involvement with the order, a vow to protect the pendant, and rumors of a guardian named Vesper who still lived. "I thought it was over," she whispered. "But the theft, it's awakened something. I'm afraid for my life." The ball continued, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere. The waiter's attack, the note, the talcum smudge, all pointed to a calculated move. Finch's absence suggested guilt. Vaughan's silence hinted at fear, and Lady Beatrice's confession opened new questions. The crypt in Paris loomed larger, a destination Poirot knew he must pursue. But first, he would find Finch, whose disappearance was no accident. "Hastings," Poirot said, striding toward the exit. "We return to Scotland Yard. Monsieur Finch has fled, but he cannot outrun the truth. The Phantom Pendant is a key, and tonight we have turned the lock a little further." Chapter 8. The Ghost of the Past. The British Library's reading room, with its domed ceiling and rows of leather-bound volumes, was a sanctuary of knowledge, but for Hercule Poirot it was a battlefield of clues. Seated at a polished oak table, surrounded by stacks of dusty archives, he pored over records of the Comtesse de la Roche, the Phantom Pendant's original owner. Captain Hastings, less at ease in the scholarly hush, fidgeted with a newspaper, his eyes occasionally drifting to the other researchers, as if expecting the thief to emerge from behind a bookcase. The masquerade ball had tightened the web of the mystery. Lady Beatrice's confession, Marcus Finch's disappearance, and Dr. Vaughan's evasions all pointed to a secret rooted in the pendant's past. Today Poirot sought to unearth that past, believing it held the key to the present theft. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a low murmur to avoid disturbing the room's silence. "You must not fidget so. The answers lie here, in the pages of history. The Comtesse's disappearance in 1892 is no mere footnote. It is the heart of our puzzle." Hastings leaned closer, keeping his voice down. "I get that, Poirot, but this feels like chasing ghosts. That note at the ball. Sir Vesper Waite set. Its set's got me spooked. You think this Comtesse is somehow involved?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Not a ghost, Hastings, but her shadow lingers. The pendant, the Order of the Rose and Serpent, the name Vesper, these are threads of a tapestry woven long ago. Let us see what the archives reveal." He opened a folder of Parisian newspapers from 1892, their brittle pages yellowed but legible. The headlines screamed of scandal. The Comtesse de la Roche, a young widow of dazzling beauty, had vanished after a masked ball at the Palais Garnier. Her emerald pendant, a gift from a mysterious lover, was rumored to be cursed, linked to a string of misfortunes, bankruptcies, suicides, and unexplained deaths. One article mentioned a lover named Vesper, a poet and member of an obscure society, who was questioned but never charged. The pendant, it seemed, had been stolen from Eleanor Harrow, Lady Beatrice's great-aunt, before the Comtesse's disappearance, fueling rumors of betrayal and revenge. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he read a faded diary entry, tucked into an archival file, attributed to Eleanor Harrow herself. "Listen, Hastings," he said, translating from the French. "She took it, my heart and my jewel. Vesper swore to reclaim it, but I fear the cost. The Rose and Serpent bind us, but they will destroy us." He set the diary down. His fingers steepled. This Vesper was more than a lover. They were the guardian of the pendant, sworn to the order, and Eleanor Harrow, she was betrayed. Non. Hastings frowned, scratching his head. Betrayed by the Comtesse, so the pendant was stolen from Eleanor, and then the Comtesse vanished with it. But how does that connect to now? Someone sits after it again, and they set not playing nice. "Précisément," Poirot said, turning to a photograph in the file, a grainy image of the Comtesse, her dark eyes haunting, the phantom pendant gleaming at her throat. The resemblance to Lady Beatrice was striking, not just in features, but in the fear etched into her expression. "This photograph," Poirot murmured. "It is no coincidence. Lady Beatrice fears not just the curse, but her family's role in this tragedy. The pendant's theft today mirrors the past, a cycle of greed and vengeance." He cross-referenced the diary with Dr. Vaughan's notes, which mentioned a Paris crypt where the Order of the Rose and Serpent conducted rituals. The crypt, located beneath a church in Montmartre, was linked to Vesper, who had vanished after the Comtesse's disappearance. A map fragment in the file showed the crypt's entrance, marked with the Rose and Serpent symbol. Poirot's pulse quickened. "This crypt, Hastings, it is where the cipher from the locket leads us. The note at the ball confirms it. The thief, or Vesper's successor, is drawing us there." Hastings leaned back, his eyes wide. Eustace saying this Vesper might still be alive, or someone fit's taken their name, playing the guardian role. Exactament, Poirot said, closing the file. The order is not dead, only hidden. Marcus Finch's ledger mentioned a shipment to Istanbul, signed V. Dr. Vaughan's stolen letter spoke of the crypt. Lady Beatrice's fear ties her to Eleanor's betrayal. This Vesper, or their heir, orchestrates the theft, using the pendant to settle an old score. As they prepared to leave, Poirot noticed a librarian hovering nearby, her hands clasped nervously. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, glancing around. A man was here earlier, asking for the same files. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and left this. She handed him a card with a single word, Vesper. Poirot sits, grip tightened on his cane. "Merci, mademoiselle. Did he say anything else?" She shook her head. "He was in a hurry, left when I said the files were checked out." Outside, the London streets were bustling, but Poirot's mind was in Paris, 1892. The card, the photograph, the diary, all confirmed the thief's obsession with the past. The wide-brimmed hat matched the figure from the auction house, and the ball, a shadow trailing their every move. Was it Finch, fleeing his own betrayal? Vaughan, hiding his true role, or a new player, claiming Vesper's mantle? "Hastings," Poirot said, hailing a cab. "We must prepare for Paris. The crypt holds the answers, the pendant or the truth behind it. But first we find Monsieur Finch. His disappearance is no accident, and he knows who this Vesper is."
Hastings nodded.
His jaw set.
"This is getting dangerous, Poirot."
"That card, it sets like they set daring us to follow." "Oui, mon ami," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming, and Hercule Poirot accepts the challenge. "The Phantom Pendant is a key, but the lock is in the past. We shall open it, and the ghost of the Comtesse will speak." The cab rolled toward Scotland Yard, where Poirot hoped to learn of Finch's whereabouts. The mystery was a tapestry of love, betrayal, and vengeance, woven across decades. Each clue, the rose and serpent, the name Vesper, the crypt, drew them closer to the truth. But the shadow of the thief loomed, and Poirot knew the next move could be deadly. With his unmatched intellect, he was ready to face the ghost of the past and unmask the phantom of the present. Chapter 9. The Trap in the Alley. The gaslit streets of Whitechapel buzzed with the evening clamour of hawkers and dockworkers, their voices swallowed by the creeping fog that once again cloaked London. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the damp chill, moved with purpose down a narrow alley, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. Captain Hastings followed, his hand resting on the revolver in his pocket, his eyes scanning the shadows. Poirot had orchestrated a trap to catch the figure who had been tailing them since the masquerade ball, a shadow in a wide-brimmed hat, linked to the Phantom Pendant's theft and the elusive Vesper. The British Library's revelations about the Comtesse de la Roche and the Order of the Rose and Serpent had convinced Poirot that this figure held answers, and he was determined to confront them. "Mon ami," Poirot whispered, pausing at a corner where the alley split. "We are close. The bait has been set. Inspector Japsip's men are positioned at the alley sip's end, and our thitflexeps to the press about a breakthrough in the case has reached the right ears. The shadow will come." Hastings frowned, his breath visible in the cold air. "I don't set like it, Poirot. Luring a thief into a dark alley feels like asking for trouble. What if they sept are armed?" Poirot Sip's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Trouble, Hastings, is precisely what we seek. Controlled trouble. The thief, or their agent, cannot resist the chance to silence us. But Hercule Poirot is never unprepared." The leak had been carefully planted, a discreet tip to a gossip columnist suggesting Poirot had found a key clue to the pendant's whereabouts. He had ensured the rumor reached Marcus Finch's contacts in the underworld, hoping to draw out the fugitive art dealer or his mysterious associate. The alley, chosen for its seclusion, was a perfect stage for a confrontation. Jap's constables waited in the shadows, ready to close the net. Poirot adjusted his scarf, his eyes scanning the fog. A faint scuff of boots echoed from the left fork of the alley, and he gestured for Hastings to stay low. "Listen," he murmured. "They approach. Be ready, but do not act until I signal." The sound grew closer. A deliberate tread, cautious but purposeful. A figure emerged from the mist, cloaked in a dark coat, the wide-brimmed hat casting their face in shadow. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Monsieur, or perhaps Madame, you have followed me since the auction. It is time to reveal yourself. Why do you seek the Phantom Pendant?" The figure froze, their hand slipping into a pocket. Hastings tensed, but Poirot raised a hand, his gaze unwavering. "You will not need a weapon," he said. "Hercule Poirot seeks only the truth. Speak, and perhaps we may avoid unpleasantness." The figure's voice, low and rasping, cut through the fog. "You stir meddling in things you don't understand, Poirot. The pendant belongs to the Order. Leave it, or you regret it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The Order of the Rose and Serpent. We, and you. Are you Vesper, their guardian, or merely a servant, sent to warn me?" The figure laughed, a harsh sound. "Vesper is a name, not a person. The pendant Sep's ours by right. You, Sep, found the crypt Sep's clue. Heaven set you. You Seps never reach it." Before Poirot could respond, the figure lunged, a glint of steel flashing in their hand, a knife aimed at Poirot's chest. Hastings shouted, drawing his revolver, but Poirot was faster, sidestepping with surprising agility and striking the figure's wrist with his cane. The knife clattered to the cobblestones, and the figure stumbled back, clutching their arm. "Now, Jap," Poirot called, and the alley came alive with constables, their lanterns piercing the fog. The figure bolted, but the alley's end was blocked, and a scuffle ensued. The wide-brimmed hat fell, revealing a shock of dark hair and a scarf concealing the lower face. Before Poirot could close the distance, the figure slipped through a gap between buildings, leaving behind a small object, a silver cufflink, engraved with the rose and serpent symbol. Hastings cursed, holstering his revolver. "Blast it, Poirot, they got away. But that cufflink, it Sep's a dead giveaway. Part of the Order, just like you thought." Poirot retrieved the cufflink, examining it under a constable Sip's lantern. "Boy, Hastings, but not a giveaway. Another breadcrumb. This is no common thief. The cufflink is bespoke, expensive. Our shadow is someone of means or connected to someone who is." Jap joined them, his face red from the chase. "Slippery devil, that one. We Sep got the knife and the cufflink, but no face. You sure about this trap, Poirot? Nearly got yourself skewered." Poirot Sipta's smile was serene. "A calculated risk, mon ami. The shadow has confirmed much. The Order is active. The crypt in Paris is their goal, and they fear our progress. The warning about Vesper, it is a clue to their identity or their master Septa's." He turned the cufflink over, noting a faint monogram, LV. His mind raced, connecting it to the V in Finch Sep's ledger and Vaughan Tip's notes. "LV," he murmured. "Vesper, perhaps, or another name. Lady Beatrice. None too obvious. But someone close to the Order." Hastings rubbed his hands against the cold. "What now? We can steam to let them get to Paris first." "If the pendant stints in that crypt—" "Patience, Hastings," Poirot said, pocketing the cufflink. "The pendant may not be in the crypt, but the truth is, the thief leaves clues to taunt us, or to mislead. We must follow, but with caution. The Order protects its secrets fiercely." Back at Scotland Yard, Poirot shared the cufflink with Jap, who promised to trace its maker. The knife, plain but sharp, offered little, but the talcum powder residue on its handle matched the smudges from the auction house and the ball. A signature, perhaps, Poirot mused, or a habit betraying our shadow's identity. As they left, Poirot's thoughts turned to the suspects. Marcus Finch, still missing, knew the black market's hunger for the pendant. Dr. Vaughan's research made him a target or a conspirator. Lady Beatrice's fear suggested she was a pawn, but her family's history tied her to the order, the LV. Cufflink hinted at a new player, perhaps the true Vesper, orchestrating from the shadows. "Hastings," Poirot said, climbing into a cab. "We prepare for Paris. The crypt awaits. But first, we must find Monsieur Finch. His disappearance is a thread we cannot ignore, and this cufflink, it will lead us to the shadow." The cab rolled through the foggy streets, and Poirot's mind churned. The alley's trap had failed to catch the figure, but it had tightened the mystery's web. The rose and serpent symbol, the name Vesper, the crypt in Paris, all were pieces of a puzzle only Hercule Poirot could solve. The Phantom Pendant was a beacon, drawing danger and deceit, and he was determined to unmask the phantom before the next move turned deadly. Chapter 10. The Clockmaker Sceptre's Clue. The narrow streets of Clerkenwell, London's historic watchmaking district, were alive with the rhythmic ticking of countless clocks, their chimes blending into a symphony of time. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat dusted with a light drizzle, navigated the cobblestones with Captain Hastings at his side. Their destination was the shop of Mr. Nathaniel Wren, an eccentric clockmaker rumoured to have crafted a mechanism linked to the Phantom Pendant. The alley trap had yielded a tantalizing clue, the LV cufflink, but the shadow's escape had only deepened the mystery. Poirot's little grey cells were now focused on a lead from Dr. Vaughan's notes, a reference to a clockwork device tied to the Order of the Rose and Serpent, possibly concealing a secret about the pendant's whereabouts. "Poirot," Hastings said, dodging a puddle, "this clockmaker business feels like a long shot. A clock linked to the pendant? Sounds like something out of a penny dreadful." Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Mon ami, the Order of the Rose and Serpent is nothing if not theatrical. A clockwork mechanism, crafted to hide a secret, is precisely their style. Monsieur Wren may hold the next piece of our puzzle." The shop, tucked between a jeweller and a tavern, was a relic of another era, its sign reading Wren's timepieces, in faded gold. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil and polished wood, and every surface was crowded with clocks, grandfather clocks, pocket watches, and intricate mantelpieces, all ticking in chaotic unison. Nathaniel Wren, a stooped man with wire-rimmed glasses and a shock of white hair, looked up from a workbench, his hands trembling as he adjusted a tiny gear. "Monsieur Wren," Poirot said, removing his hat with a courteous nod, "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We seek information about a clockwork device, one perhaps connected to an emerald pendant and the Order of the Rose and Serpent." Rendet's hands froze, and his glasses slipped down his nose. "The Order?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. I know nothing of such things. I make clocks, sir, not secrets." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the flicker of fear in Renside's expression. "Come, monsieur. Do not play the innocent. Your name appears in documents linked to the pendant sept's history, a mechanism crafted in the 1890s, bearing the rose and serpent symbol. You know of it, non?" Wren glanced at the shop's door, as if expecting an intruder. He shuffled to a corner, pulling a curtain aside to reveal a towering grandfather clock, its face adorned with a rose and serpent carving. "This," he said, his voice trembling, "was commissioned long ago by a woman who called herself Vesper. I was young, just an apprentice. She paid well, but her eyes, they frightened me." Poirot approached the clock, his magnifying glass glinting as he examined the carving. The rose and serpent were intricately etched, identical to the symbols on the locket, Lady Beatrice's journal, and the cufflink. He tapped the clock's base with his cane, hearing a hollow echo. "A compartment, perhaps," he murmured, his fingers probing the wood. A faint click revealed a hidden panel, sliding open to expose a small brass box, locked with a keyhole shaped like a serpent's head. Hastings leaned in, his eyes wide. "Good Lord, Poirot, you've done it again. What's inside?" Remston's face paled, and he backed away. "I swear I never opened it. She said it was for the Order, to protect something. I thought it was just a fancy lockbox." Poirot produced his lockpick, his movements precise. The box sprang open, revealing a folded parchment, a map fragment showing a rural estate in Kent, marked with the rose and serpent symbol. A note in elegant script read, "The pendant sep's path begins here. The crypt awaits the worthy." "Voila," Poirot said, his voice triumphant. "The trail leads to Kent, and then to Paris. This estate, it is another step toward the crypt. But why leave such a clue, unless to guide or mislead?" Hastings frowned, clutching the map. "Mislead? You think it sups a trap like the alley?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, turning to Wren. "Monsieur, who else knows of this clock? Has anyone visited, asking about the pendant?" Renstay's hands shook as he adjusted his glasses. "A man came yesterday in a wide-brimmed hat. He offered me money to open the clock, but I refused. He threatened me, said the order would find me if I spoke. I swear I told him nothing." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "This man, describe him. Was he Marcus Finch, the art dealer?" Wren shook his head. "I don't sit no names. He was tall, spoke with a slight accent. French, maybe. He left when I wouldn't set cooperate, but I saw him watching the shop later." Hastings clenched his fists. "That sips our shadow, Poirot. The same one from the alley, the ball, the library. He sips everywhere." "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said, pocketing the map. "And he is desperate. The cufflink, the talcum powder, now this visit, all point to a single figure or a small group, protecting the pendant's secret. We must go to this estate, but first we warn Inspector Japp. Monsieur Finch remains at large, and our shadow grows bolder." As they left the shop, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective. Poirot's mind churned. The clock's hidden box, the map to Kent, the note about the crypt, all confirmed the order's active role. Cufflink suggested a name, perhaps Vesper's true identity or an alias. Lady Beatrice's fear, Vaughan's evasions, Finch's disappearance, each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, with the pendant as its center. "Hastings," Poirot said, hailing a cab, "we prepare for Kent. This estate may hold the pendant, or another clue to the crypt, but we must be vigilant. Our shadow knows we are close, and they will strike again." The cab rolled toward Baker Street, where Poirot planned to study the map further. The clockmaker's clue had opened a new path, but the danger was palpable. The Phantom Pendant was a magnet for greed and vengeance, and Poirot knew the next step could lead to answers or disaster. With his unmatched intellect, he was ready to face the shadow and unravel the mystery's heart. Chapter 11. The Estate of Secrets. The Kent countryside unfolded in a patchwork of rolling hills and ancient oaks, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the landscape. Hercule Poirot, seated in a hired car beside Captain Hastings, studied the map fragment from the clockmaker's shop, its faded lines pointing to Blackthorn Manor, a crumbling estate linked to the Order of the Rose and Serpent. The Phantom Pendant's trail had led them here, following the cipher's clues and the note's cryptic promise. The pendant's path begins here. The crypt awaits the worthy. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with anticipation, but the shadow trailing them, the figure in the wide-brimmed hat, loomed in his mind, a reminder of the danger closing in. "Hastings," Poirot said, adjusting his hat against the glare, "this manor, it is no mere stop on our journey. It is a vault of secrets, tied to the Order, and perhaps to Vesper. We must be prepared for surprises." Hastings gripped the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the empty road. "Surprises. Sit rather we find the pendant and be done with it, Poirot. That shadow in the alley nearly had you, and this place looks like it's been forgotten since Queen Victoria." The car turned onto a rutted lane, where Blackthorn Manor emerged from the mist, a Gothic pile of weathered stone, its windows dark, its chimneys choked with ivy. The estate's caretaker, a grizzled man named Amos Grigg, met them at the gate, his lantern swinging in the gathering dusk. His weathered face was set in a scowl, and his voice carried a warning. "You the detective, then? I don't like strangers poking about. The manor's private, and I've orders to keep it that way." Poirot bowed, his charm undimmed. "Monsieur Grigg, I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We seek only answers. not trouble. The manor. It is connected to an emerald pendant, stolen recently. You know of it, non? Grigstus' eyes narrowed, but he stepped aside, muttering, "Know nothing about pendants. Just keep the place tidy. Follow me, but don't touch anything." The manor's interior was a labyrinth of dust-covered furniture and faded tapestries, the air heavy with the scent of mildew. As Grig led them through a cavernous hall, Poirot's gaze caught strange symbols carved into the woodwork, roses entwined with serpents, identical to those in Lady Beatrice's journal, Dr. Vaughan's notes, and the clockmaker's box. "The order," he murmured to Hastings. "Their mark is everywhere." This was no mere residence. In a drawing-room, Poirot noticed a portrait above the fireplace, a woman resembling the Comtesse de la Roche, her neck adorned with the Phantom Pendant. The plaque read Eleanor Harrow, 1890. Hastings whispered, "That's Lady Beatrice's great-aunt. The pendant was hers before the Comtesse stole it, wasn't it?" "Oui," Poirot replied, his eyes scanning the room. "And this manor was her home. The betrayal happened here, perhaps setting the stage for the curse." Grig, lingering by the door, grew agitated. "You've seen enough. Time to go." But Poirot sits. Attention was drawn to a spiral staircase descending to the cellar. "One moment, Monsieur Grig. What lies below? A cellar, or something more significant?" Greg's hand twitched toward a pocket, but Poirot's piercing gaze held him in place. "Just storage," the caretaker growled. "Nothing for you." Ignoring the protest, Poirot descended the stairs, Hastings close behind. The cellar was damp and cold, its walls lined with crates and cobwebs. At the far end, a stone archway bore the rose and serpent symbol, half hidden by dust. Poirot brushed it clean, revealing a locked iron door. "A crypt, perhaps," he mused, testing the lock with his pick. It clicked open, revealing a narrow chamber lit by flickering torchlight. Inside, the walls were carved with symbols and names. Vesper, Eleanor, the Comtesse, arranged in a spiral around a stone plinth. On it lay a single rose, fresh despite the manor's decay, and a note: "The worthy seek the Paris crypt. The pendant is not here, but its shadow remains." Hastings cursed softly. Another blasted clue. "They start playing with us, Poirot." "No pendant, just more riddles." "None, Hastings," Poirot said, pocketing the note. "This chamber confirms the order set's reach. The rose. It is a sign they were here recently. The pendant may be in Paris, but this manor hides motives. Grig knows more than he admits." As they turned to leave, a creak echoed from above. Grig stood at the cellar sept's entrance, a shotgun in his hands. "You gone too far, detective," he growled. "No one leaves with the order sept's secrets." Hastings drew his revolver, but Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm. "Monsieur Grig, you are no killer, only a guardian like Vesper before you. Tell me, who orders you to protect this place? The one called Vesper, or another?" Grig's grip faltered, his eyes darting to the shadows. I don't stud no names. A man came weeks ago in a wide-brimmed hat, paid me to keep quiet, to watch for snoopers. Said the pendant belonged to the order, and they kill to keep it." Poirot nodded, stepping closer. "And this man tall with a French accent, perhaps. You will tell Inspector Japp all you know, or face charges as an accomplice." Before Grig could respond, a shadow moved in the cellar's corner, a figure in a dark coat, the wide-brimmed hat unmistakable. Hastings lunged, but the figure hurled a crate, sending it crashing between them, and fled through a hidden passage. Poirot gave chase, but the passage led to a trapdoor opening onto the manor's grounds, where the figure vanished into the dusk. "Blast it!" Hastings exclaimed, panting, "That Sipter's our shadow again. They Sipter always one step ahead." "Non, Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "They are desperate, leaving clues to slow us. The rose, the note, the chamber, All confirm the Paris crypt is our destination, but Grigg, he will talk. Back in the hall, Grigg had lowered his shotgun, his resolve broken. Poirot signaled for Japp's men, waiting in the village to take him for questioning. The caretaker's fear suggested he was a pawn, not a mastermind, but his mention of the wide-brimmed hat tied the manor to the alley, the ball, and the library. As they drove back to London, Poirot's mind churned. The manor's chamber, the fresh rose, the note, all pointed to an active order, with Vesper's name as their rallying cry. Marcus Finch, Doctor. Vaughan, Lady Beatrice. Each played a role, but the shadow's persistence suggested a fourth player, orchestrating from the dark. The Paris crypt loomed, and Poirot knew it held the pendant, or the truth behind its theft. "Hastings," he said, staring into the twilight. "We prepare for Paris. But first, we learn what Grigg knows. The Phantom Pendant is a key, and Blackthorn Manor has turned it. Hercule Poirot will unlock the rest." Chapter 12. The Phantom Scepter's identity. The drawing-room of Claridge's hotel, bathed in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, was an unlikely stage for a denouement, but Hercule Poirot had chosen it for its elegance and neutrality. The suspects, Lady Beatrice Harrow, Doctor, Elias Vaughan, and Marcus Finch, recently apprehended at Dover, sat in a semicircle, their faces a mix of fear, defiance, and unease. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his constables at the ready, while Captain Hastings hovered near Poirot, his notebook open but forgotten. The Phantom Pendant's theft had woven a web of clues: talcum powder, rose and serpent symbols, a Paris crypt, and the name Vesper, and Poirot was ready to unravel it, revealing the thief and their motive in a dramatic confrontation. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding, pacing the room with his cane, tapping softly. The theft of the Phantom Pendant was no mere crime of greed. It was a performance, a chess game played by a mastermind who calls themselves the Phantom. But Hercule Poirot does not chase phantoms. He finds the truth. Tonight, I name the thief. Lady Beatrice clutched her lace handkerchief, her silver-streaked hair catching the light. "Monsieur Poirot, I have told you everything. I wanted the pendant to end my family theft's curse, not to steal it." Dr. Vaughan, his spectacles fogged with nervous sweat, stammered, "I only studied its history. The order, the crypt. I have been a scholar, not a criminal." Marcus Finch, his crimson doublet replaced by a rumpled suit, smirked despite his handcuffs. "You have got nothing on me, Poirot. I was in Dover, not stealing jewels. I am a businessman, not a ghost." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching. "A businessman. Oui, but one entangled in a web of deceit. Let us begin with the facts. The pendant vanished during a blackout at Sotheby's, leaving a note. The Phantom claims what is hers. Talcum powder marked the pedestal, a clue repeated at the ball, and Blackthorn Manor, a locket cipher led to a Whitechapel chapel, then a Kent estate, and finally a Paris crypt. The rose and serpent symbol ties you all to the Order of the Rose and Serpent, and the name Vesper haunts every step. The rose and serpent symbol ties you all to the Order of the Rose and Serpent, and the name Vesper haunts every step. He turned to Lady Beatrice. "Madame Harrow, your great-aunt Eleanor was betrayed by the Comtesse de la Roche, who stole the pendant in 1892. Your fear at the auction was not of a curse, but of a family secret, an oath to reclaim the jewel. You bid to protect it, non? But you did not steal it." Lady Beatrice nodded, tears welling. "I wanted to bury the past. The order, my family was part of it, but I swore to end its hold." Poirot faced Vaughan. "Monsieur le Docteur, your research uncovered the Order Scepter's rituals and the crypt in Montmartre. Your stolen letter mentioned Vesper, a guardian. You feared for your life, yet you hid the truth, hoping to protect your work or yourself." Vaughan Sobben's hands trembled. I thought the order was a myth. When my office was broken into, I realized they were real. I didn't steal anything." Poirot's gaze shifted to Finch. "And you, Monsieur Finch? You knew the pendant sept's black market value. Your ledger mentioned a shipment to Istanbul, signed Theversip. You fled to Dover, but not as the thief, as a pawn, betrayed by your contact. Finch's smirk faded. I was set up, Poirot. Someone tipped off the coppers. I only arranged a buyer. That sips all. Poirot stopped pacing, his voice rising. Non mes amis. The thief is not among you, yet they are close. The phantom is Vesper, or claims to be. The talcum powder, the rose and serpent symbols, the cufflink marked LV, all point to a fourth player, manipulating you all. This Vesper is not the poet of 1892, but their heir seeking to fulfill an oath of vengeance. He produced the cufflink, holding it aloft. This was dropped in the alley by a figure in a wide-brimmed hat. The same figure watched me at the auction, the ball, the library, and Blackthorn Manor. They are no ghost, but a woman, Lucille Vesper, a descendant of the original Vesper, the Comtesse's lover. A gasp broke the silence. Not from the suspects, but from a figure stepping from behind a curtain, the hotel's concierge, a woman in her 30s with dark hair and a sharp gaze. She wore a simple uniform, but her poise betrayed confidence. "You're clever, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice carrying a faint French accent. "But you're too late." Hastings drew his revolver, but Poirot raised a hand. "Mademoiselle Lucille, or should I say Vesper, you have played a bold game. The pendant was stolen to settle an old score, your ancestors' betrayal by Eleanor Harrow. You used Lady Beatrice's fear, Vaughan's research, and Finch's greed to create chaos, while you, the humble concierge, listened and planned." Lucille Seft's lips curled. "The pendant was ours, stolen by the Harrows. The order swore to reclaim it. I left clues to draw you to Paris, to the crypt where the truth of the Comtesse Seft's murder lies. But you never find the pendant." Poirot's smile was serene. "None, mademoiselle. I already have." He signaled Jap, who produced a velvet pouch from his coat. Inside was the phantom pendant, its emerald gleaming. Your mistake was the talcum powder, a habit from your stage days in Paris, used to mask your tools. Jap's men found it in your quarters here, along with the wide-brimmed hat. Lucille Seft's composure cracked, her eyes blazing. "Mais oui," Poirot said. "The cufflink, monogrammed LV, was yours, a gift from your grandfather, the original Vesper. The note at the auction, the cipher, the rose at Blackthorn Manor, all your theatrics to revive the Order's myth. You framed Finch, intimidated Vaughan, and terrorized Lady Beatrice, all to reclaim what you believed was yours." Japsip's constables moved in, cuffing Lucille as she glared at Poirot. "The Order will rise again," she hissed. "The pendant Sip's curse is real." Poirot shook his head. "The curse, mademoiselle, is only greed and vengeance, dressed in myth. Your ancestor Ced's love for the Comtesse was betrayed, but murder and theft do not right old wrongs." As Lucille was led away, Lady Beatrice sobbed, Vaughan slumped in relief, and Finch muttered curses. Hastings clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "You Sev done it again, old chap. But how Sev do you know it was her?" "The little grey cells." "Hastings," Poirot said, tapping his temple. "The talcum, the cufflink. Her access to the ball as a concierge, small clues, but they spoke loudly. The pendant is recovered, but the crypt remains. Tomorrow we go to Paris." The room emptied, leaving Poirot staring at the pendant. The phantom's identity was revealed, but the Order's shadow lingered, and he knew the final reckoning awaited. Chapter 13. The Final Reckoning. The Montmartre district of Paris buzzed with the lively chatter of artists and tourists, but beneath its cobblestone streets a darker history awaited. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat pristine despite the damp chill of the early morning, descended a narrow staircase leading to the crypt of Saint-Denis Church. Guided by the map fragment from Blackthorn Manor and Dr. Vaughan's stolen letter, Captain Hastings followed, his revolver tucked discreetly in his coat, his nerves taut from the revelation of Lucille Vesper's identity as the Phantom. The Phantom Pendant, recovered from her quarters, rested safely with Inspector Japp in London, but Poirot was certain the crypt held the final piece of the puzzle, a truth about the Order of the Rose and Serpent that Lucille had risked everything to protect. The air grew colder as they reached an iron gate, its surface etched with the familiar rose and serpent symbol. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice echoing in the stone passage. "We are at the heart of the mystery. Lucille Vesper stole the pendant to fulfill an oath, but the crypt, she believed it held proof of the Comtesse de la Roche's murder. We must uncover this truth, or the Order's shadow will linger." Hastings gripped his revolver, his eyes scanning the shadows. "I don't sounds like this, Poirot. Lucille Sept's in custody, but what if the Order has others? This place gives me the creeps." Poirot Sip's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Courage, Hastings. The creeps, as you say, are but the echoes of history. Hercule Poirot fears only an unsolved puzzle." Using his lockpick, Poirot opened the gate, revealing a cavernous chamber lit by flickering sconces. The walls were carved with intricate symbols, roses and serpents spiraling toward a central altar where a stone slab bore an inscription. "To the worthy the truth is revealed." The pendant is the key. Scattered around the altar were faded documents, a rusted dagger, and a locket identical to the one from the auction house, its interior empty. Poirot knelt, examining the documents with his magnifying glass. They were letters, dated 1892, between the Comtesse de la Roche and her lover Vesper, detailing a plot to steal the pendant from Eleanor Harrow. One letter, stained with what appeared to be blood, read, "Eleanor knows our secret. She threatens to expose the Order. The pendant must be ours, or all is lost." Another, in a different hand, confessed, "I struck her in fear, not malice. Forgive me, Vesper." "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. "The Comtesse did not vanish. She was murdered here."
"By Eleanor Harrow."
"The pendant was stolen to cover the crime, and the Order says oath was born of guilt and vengeance." Hastings Sep's jaw dropped. Eleanor killed the Comtesse. So Lady Beatrice Sep's family was in Sept just betrayed. They were murderers. No wonder she Sep's terrified. "Oui," Poirot said, pocketing the letters. "Lucille Vesper, as Vesper Sit's descendant, sought to reclaim the pendant and expose Eleanor Sit's crime, reviving the Order Sit's mission. But her theatrics, talcum powder, ciphers, notes were her undoing." As Poirot spoke, a creak echoed from the crypt's entrance. Hastings spun, revolver raised, as a figure emerged from the shadows. Not the wide-brimmed hat of their pursuer, but Dr. Elias Vaughan, his face ashen, clutching a satchel. "Monsieur Poirot," he stammered. I had to come. The crypt. I found a reference in my notes, after you left. I couldn't stay away." Poirot's sticks, gaze sharpened. "Monsieur Vaughan, your timing is most curious. Why come to Paris, alone, unless you seek more than knowledge?" Vaughan's hands trembled, and he dropped the satchel, spilling papers marked with rose and serpent symbols. "I'm not with them, I swear. I found a ledger. Lucille contacted me months ago, posing as a researcher. She used my work to track the pendant. I came to warn you, the Order isn't just her. There's another, a leader, still out there." Before Poirot could respond, a low rumble shook the crypt, and dust fell from the ceiling. A hidden panel in the altar slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel. From it stepped a man, tall, grey-haired, with a French accent and a cane bearing the rose and serpent symbol. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice cold, "you've meddled too far. The Order protects its own." Hastings aimed his revolver, but Poirot stepped forward, undaunted. "Monsieur, you are the true Vesper Non, not Lucille, but her mentor, guiding her from the shadows. You orchestrated the theft, using her to reclaim the pendant and settle the Order Step's score." The man cell's eyes narrowed. "I am Henry Vesper, last of the Order cells. The pendant was our birthright, stolen by Eleanor Harrow after she murdered the Comtesse. Lucille was my tool, but you Sipth ruined everything." Poirot Sip's smile was serene. "Non, monsieur. You ruined yourself. Your talcum powder, your cufflink marked Tol Vil Vil. Sipped, you thought them clever, but they betrayed you. Chap Sips men, alerted by my telegram. Wait outside. The game is over. Vesper's cane lashed out, but Poirot sidestepped, and Hastings tackled the man, pinning him as Japp's constables, summoned by Poirot's foresight, stormed in. Vaughan sank to the floor, sobbing, while Vesper cursed in French, his dreams of vengeance shattered. As the constables led Vesper away, Poirot turned to the altar, placing the pendant sent by Japp for this purpose on the slab. The inscription glowed faintly, as if acknowledging its return. "The crypt's truth is revealed," Poirot said. "The pendant was a key to guilt, not power. The Order's oath dies here." Back in London, Poirot sat in his flat, the pendant safely in Scotland Yard Sepp's vault. Hastings poured brandy, his relief palpable. "You did it, Poirot. Lucille, Vesper, the Order, all unmasked. But how, Seps, do you know? Henri was the mastermind." "The little grey cells, Hastings," Poirot said, sipping his drink. "The cufflinks LV was a misdirection. Lucille's, but planted by Henri. The talcum powder, his habit from years in Paris theatres, linked every scene. He used Lucille's zeal, Finch's greed, Vaughan's fear, and Lady Beatrice's guilt to weave his plan. But Hercule Poirot sees through shadows." Hastings chuckled. "And the curse, all nonsense." "Oui," Poirot said, his eyes distant. "The only curse is human nature. Greed, vengeance, regret. The pendant is but a jewel, its power in the hearts it swayed." As the fire crackled, Poirot's thoughts turned to the next mystery. The Phantom Pendant was recovered, the Order dismantled, but the world was full of puzzles, and Hercule Poirot was ready for them all.